I built a PC in about end of 2018, beginning of 2019, and I absolutely hate it. This was the last PC I built before I started this YouTube channel, and I didn't know nearly as much about gaming PC hardware at the time. Honestly, I found some random build guide in my budget online, followed it blindly, and I hated the results. And the more I got educated on all of this, the more I hated the decisions that were made in that build guide. So what we're gonna look at in this video is what if I was actually upgrading the PC that I had back then? Because had I not started this YouTube channel, I would still be using that PC, and I can tell you right now, based on how those parts are performing in current games, I would absolutely be looking for an upgrade. Now, my budget at the time was around $1,100 or $1,200, and so I'm gonna say that's once again about my upgrade budget, because while inflation has gone up, my paychecks as a teacher certainly haven't. So, I mean, not by much, nowhere near inflation. So we're gonna assume I'm around at the same budget range. Also, we're gonna assume I'm upgrading that PC. Now, this is gonna be a full rebuild, but like many people, there's certain components that you might be able to save from the old build. And specifically, that's often going to be the case, the power supply, and sometimes a CPU cooler. Now, my old system was based on an i5 9600K CPU. Now this is the first of the things that I absolutely hate here. This is a 6-core, 6-thread CPU. It doesn't have hyperthreading, and in a lot of the latest games, I've actually been testing out some recent games on this CPU as like, seeing how new games perform on a bit older hardware, that kind of thing. And the 6-core, 6-thread certainly seems to be adding some stutters, and the CPU's having some trouble keeping up compared to a lot more modern systems. Now, the GPU at the time was the RTX 2070. And I did get a fairly decent deal on it at the time. I didn't absolutely hate it. And it is still, capable in games depending on the resolution you're at. But I was actually gaming at ultra-wide 1440p, which is a bit much for the 2070 at this point in time. Now, to get for a full rebuild to be worth it, we're gonna wanna look at, I like to get at least almost double the performance when I'm building a whole new system. That's always been kind of what I've been looking for, what I've been targeting. Now, the website I'm looking at here, which I will link in the description, might be useful. This is the Tech PowerUp GPU database, and it has a relative performance chart on it that I think is very useful. However, I do want to point out that it's not 100% accurate. It's not specific to each game. New games come out, drivers change, all of that, but it does get you a pretty accurate, not perfectly accurate, ballpark figure for how different GPUs compare. So I recommend taking a look at where your current GPU is, and then looking at what would it take you to get an almost doubling of your performance, and then get an idea of, is that anywhere in your price range right now, or does it even exist right now? So if I'm going from an RTX 2070, and I want to about double the performance, I need to look for something that's almost 200% of the performance of the 2070. And when I'm looking in that kind of a range, our ballpark seems to be cards starting with the RTX 4070, which would be an 87% uplift, so close to doubling performance. Also, the RTX 4070 has 12 gigabytes of VRAM versus the 8 on the 2070, and that would help out in a lot of new games. A similar performance could be had on the 6800 XT, which costs less money. This relative performance chart doesn't get into a lot of the feature differences, but I have in some of my head-to-head comparisons. You could look at used cards like a 3080, but I've always preferred buying new. So that is what I'm going to be looking at in this video. And cards like the 6950 XT, things like that, could be in a similar price range around here. So this is kind of the ballpark on the GPUs that we would be looking for. And then from the CPU perspective, I can't just drop in a good upgrade to this into the built-in system, because a CPU upgrade requires a compatible motherboard. And this is one of the things that I hate about the build that I went with here. I could have, at the time, gone with an AMD Ryzen build, which ended up having a lot of future upgradability. I could have gone to a CPU as fast as the 5800X3D, which is a very powerful gaming CPU, not too far behind the latest and the greatest on the newest systems and motherboards. Whereas with the i5-9600K, that was basically a dead end. A 9700K or 9900K are better. They have some more cores and threads and boost a little bit higher, but there's not a dramatically large jump in gaming performance. So it feels like kind of like throwing money down the drain, upgrading this CPU without upgrading the motherboard as well. So this is going to be something that I'm going to be looking for personally in this build to correct an issue with the other one, which is I'm going to be looking for future upgradability for the CPU. And that's going to guide a lot of the build here. Now, so basically what we're looking at is these are the two most impactful pieces of hardware for a gaming PC, is the CPU and the GPU. Those are by far the two most impactful pieces of hardware. So that's where we're going to get into actually building this. And I am not sponsored by PC Part Picker in any way, but I do find that they are a very useful place to put together builds. You can track your components, track their prices. You can sort prices low to high from a variety of retailers, things like that. So that's where we're going to look here. So like I said, one of the things I want to correct from the previous build is the lack of upgradability on the CPU. And so right now you're basically looking, okay, Intel or AMD. This is in a similar place to where I was making that previous build, but I didn't know as much about the topic, where if I went with an Intel CPU right now, if I went with something like, I don't know, a 13600K, something like that, or a 13600, somewhere around there, this is a good CPU. It's very powerful, but there's also not really any upgrade path here. Intel is probably going to do a 14th gen on these same motherboards, but they're going to be minor refreshes, not much difference in gaming performance, and then that's it. You're going to need to buy a whole new motherboard if you want to upgrade past this point. Whereas AMD, if we go with their newest motherboard platform, the AM5 platform, they're currently on their first line of CPUs on these motherboards, and there will likely be at least one, if not two or even three major CPU revisions available on this platform. And the Ryzen 5 7600 is kind of your starting point at this. Now, the 7600 versus the 7600X is a minor clock speed difference, and with that minor clock speed difference comes a lower power draw on the 7600, and it also comes with a stock cooler. Now, if I was really doing this build upgrade from the old system, I would probably carry over the CPU cooler I got with the 9600K. It wasn't the stock cooler. That build, I think, had a Noctua U12S, something along those lines. Which would be perfectly adequate for cooling this, and also this does have a stock cooler, which could come in fine. Maybe the extra $10 here for the 7600X version, since I don't really need the stock cooler. I don't know, but I'm gonna save the $10. It's really basically the same CPU, and this one comes with the cooler thrown in the box. So I'm gonna go with that. Now, like I said, this is not the most powerful CPU out there, but it is a massive jump from the 9600K. This is still 6 cores, but they're much faster cores for gaming, and it's hyper-threaded, so it goes up to 12 threads. And like I said, the motherboards will now be compatible with a lot of future upgrade potential, and that's really what I'm looking for here and on this build. Now, in PC Part Picker, once you've locked in a CPU, once you click on motherboards, it's only going to show you compatible motherboards, which is really nice, and then you can sort price low to high, which is really interesting because then you can see if there's any particular deals available. Now, there's different types of motherboards that are going to support this CPU. There's A620 motherboards, and then different manufacturers make their versions of them. Those will be the cheapest. They have some downsides compared to the next step up, which is a B650. And the B650s have kind of fewer downsides on the memory and the PCIe Gen 4, Gen 5 lanes, things like that. And then you can go all the way up to an X670 board, but we have to scroll down a while to get down to those boards. It looks like the cheapest ones showing up here are around $200. Now, some motherboards have built-in Wi-Fi and things like that, which you might be drawn towards. I don't need that personally. I'm also a little wary of going down to the A620 boards, although they will certainly support the CPU and you could do that. I'm looking for a little bit of upgradability here. I don't know a lot about this particular Gigabyte board here, but I have seen that in general the Gigabyte B650s seem to have reviewed decently. So we got this one at 120. We've got the DS3H, which I have seen reviews for and did do well, up here at 145. And we could go up to 150 if we want an ASRock with some Wi-Fi on it. You know what, guys? I've always been on the kind of cheap out on motherboard route kind of guy. I know a lot of people wouldn't. A lot of what you're looking at is the what sort of memory does it support? What sort of how many PCIe slots does it have? How many USB slots does it have? All of that kind of stuff. But honestly, guys, when I was just gaming and not benchmarking things as a YouTuber and doing all that content creation stuff, I really think that this is going to give me enough and it's going to save me some money. And we'll be able to slot in some newer CPUs along the line down here. So I'm going to go with a cheap B650 along with this CPU. Again, if I was actually upgrading, I would probably be using reusing the cooler. This will come with a stock cooler that might be a little bit noisier, not keep it quite as cool as you could, but it will get the job done. Although you can find some decent coolers in the $30 to $50 range, honestly. The Peerless Assassins from Thermalright are pretty good. You could throw in one of those for like $38 if you needed to. But again, you might even try out the stock cooler and see if it gets the job done for you. And then if you're following along on this build, and then you could throw in a better CPU cooler if you feel necessary, or later on if you upgrade the CPU. Now, once you've gone with one of the latest CPU platforms like the Ryzen 7000 series, the memory does need to be DDR5 memory. So I would not have the option of carrying over my old DDR4 memory from my older build. Now, when it comes to memory, nowadays in gaming, while 16 gigabytes still usually doesn't cause problems, there are games where it can, and 32 gigabytes causes no issues whatsoever in gaming. So I'm going to go with two 16 gigabyte sticks. Now there's a useful filter here where I can go 2x16, and then it's going to only show me 2x16 kits. You definitely want to get two rather than just one. And again, 32 gigabytes should be absolutely all we need for gaming, but then there's also RAM speeds. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sort prices low to high. But then we're going to look at the two things impacting how fast is this RAM going to be in gaming, which really only impacts you when you're CPU limited in gaming, which isn't going to be all the time. So I'm not someone who advocates spending way too much chasing the fastest RAM unless you're building an extremely high-end system. But that doesn't mean I'm against spending a little bit more to get RAM that's a little bit faster, right? So the cheapest RAM available has a speed of DDR5 5200, but the other number you should look at is the cache latency. And those two things together can affect the first word overall latency, which they do kind of list here as well. And so you want to both get a lower cache latency is better, higher RAM speeds are better, and on the AMD CPUs, going up to the speed of about 6,000 is usually kind of the sweet spot, with subtleties with like the memory fabric and whatnot. Anyway, but the point is, then you can drop the cache latency lower and get some better speeds. I'm seeing here the cheapest ones at about $66, but pretty bad cache latency and speeds. I'm seeing some DDR5 6000 here. for $10 more, but the cast latency is still 40, which is not great. So I'm going to check, can we get any DDR5 6000 with a lower cast latency without having to spend a lot more? So I'm just kind of scrolling down. I'm seeing DDR5 6000 cast latency 38. Scrolling down a little bit more, how far do we have to go to get closer to CL30? Okay, here for $85, I am seeing DDR5 6000 with a cast latency of 32, which is noticeably lower. And you can see that this first word latency is down here under 11 nanoseconds, where you can see a lot of the ones, further up were a much higher latency number, that kind of thing. Now, some people care about, what the RAM looks like. I'm not super hung up on any of that. Another thing I recommend checking is on the DDR5 memory is if the actual product page mentions AMD or Intel on it being supported, because I think some are designed more with support for one or the other in mind. This one, let's see if we scroll down a little bit here. It does say AMD and Intel compatible, AMD Ryzen compatible. Okay, I have a feeling we are going to be okay on this. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this one into the build because it seemed, it is $20 more than the absolute cheapest kit. But we are getting a faster RAM kit here, and it is only a $20 upgrade. So I'm going to throw that in there. And you really can't get too much faster on the AMD systems, and I think you'd be paying a lot more for that if you did. So that's where we're at here. That's our overall platform. Now, the next biggest thing is going to be the GPU upgrade. Now, there's a lot of possible choices on that. Like I said, my old GPU was a 2070. It's an 8GB GPU, which if you look at my testing recently, I've shown that in the latest games, at least at the highest graphics settings, 8GB certainly can be a limiting factor, which is a bit annoying. If I go again, like I said, on this relative performance chart that I showed you earlier, like I said, coming in with cards starting at around the 4070 and up, is where we will start to see an almost doubling of the performance of my 2070. Also, all of these GPUs have more than 8GB of VRAM, which would also be very nice. So what I'm going to do right now is check the current pricing on a variety of these. So one card in that list, like I said, was the 4070 if I wanted to stick with NVIDIA. If I sort prices low to high, the cheapest ones are $590. And then there's a whole bunch available right at $600 with different cooler models on them. For the most part, all the different coolers, are going to perform in gaming very similarly. Some might be a little bit quieter. Some might be a little bit bigger or smaller. When you think about fitting it in your case, things like that. Anyway, so that's the 4070. Now, the 6800 XT from AMD has very similar performance when you're not using ray tracing and only costs $520. However, it's an older tech, so it doesn't have the new AV1 encoder if you're interested in recording and streaming, especially to YouTube at a higher quality. The 6800 XT does have 16GB of VRAM instead of the 12 on the 4070. The 6800 XT also is going to draw more power, not be as good at ray tracing, and doesn't have as good upscaling technology as DLSS. So FSR2 is good, but DLSS does look a bit better, image quality-wise. Another option in this similar price point is the 6950 XTs, which come in at a little over $600, so cost a little bit more than the 4070, but is faster when you're not ray tracing. I have detailed head-to-head comparisons on all of these. And these are the main ones to choose from unless you want to go on the used market and look at cards like the 3080. The 3080s brand new right now, though, are not good deals at all. You'd want to be looking used if you were going to look in that kind of a point. Now, for me personally, I'm going to choose the 4070. If this was actually my upgrade, I would go with the 4070. However, I think a lot of people especially if you need to shave a little bit of money off the budget, might go with the 6800 XT. One reason is that honestly, I do like upscaling tech. I'm also using this on an ultra-wide monitor. So 1440p ultra-wide, even on a 4070, there's a lot of games where I think I will be wanting to upscale to get the performance numbers that I'm looking for. And because of that, I am more drawn towards DLSS than I am to FSR implementations right now. Also, I like the increased power efficiency because another thing about my older build is the case kind of sucks. It has not very good airflow. And so the less energy you're throwing into that case, the less there is to cool. So I like the idea of that. Also, in my testing, 12 gigabytes of VRAM has been good right now. 16 gigabytes certainly, probably will have some payoff at some point down the road. But I think this will get me where I need to be for right now. But like I said, the 6800 XT, if you want to go with the AMD route, don't care as much about ray tracing, things like that. Personally, I do like to play with the latest bells and whistles. I like to play around with frame generation. I like DLSS. And it gets similar rasterized performance and better ray tracing performance. I am going to pay $80 more, but on the price of the whole build, that's not going to be a massive break in the budget. I wish this was about $100 cheaper, to be honest, but I'm going to go in with the 4070. Like I said, you could watch my detailed head-to-head comparisons against the 6800 XT and the 6950 XT against the 4070, and I think some people could be drawn to some of those options for their use cases. Personally, I'd probably be using a lot of DLSS quality, maybe frame generation, and I do like playing around with ray tracing a bit and streaming, things like that, AV1 encoder. So this is going to be the route I'm going to go for this build. Now, storage, I actually could bring forward some storage from my old build, but that was another thing that I was not super happy with on that build. The build guide recommended an M.2 SSD, but it wasn't an NVMe drive. It was still connected through a SATA port. Also, storage has gotten really, really cheap lately. This is one of the best times to buy SSDs. I think that I've ever seen. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna click on SSD filter, so we're only looking at SSDs, and I'm gonna look for at least a 2 terabyte drive. So I'm scrolling up the gigabyte capacity. That'll be able to fit a lot of games. My previous build had a 1 gigabyte drive, which I could still bring in as a second drive if I really needed to. And I'm gonna sort prices low to high. Now, the cheapest ones are gonna be these older SATA drives, which operate at a much lower speed, but they don't require an M.2 slot. So if you were on an older motherboard that maybe didn't have an M.2 slot or you don't have one available, honestly, most games are still gonna run completely fine on a SATA SSD, and you can even save a little bit of money getting there. However, if I'm looking for a main boot drive that I'm also putting games on, I do care a little bit more about the speed. So as we get down to these M.2 drives, most of them are actually going to be NVMe connections, although like I said, on my older build, mine wasn't, which was a bit annoying. But then there's speed differences. For example, if I click on one of these, let's go with the Team Group MP33. If I open up this page, let's do it in a new tab, maybe pop into the Amazon listing. So if I pop in here, we're gonna see its speeds on this one are 1800, 1500 for the read-write capacity. I don't think it's mentioning okay, this does say TLC. TLC is a little bit better than QLC, but not as good as SLC. It's how many bits they're cramming into one thing. It can affect the speeds and longevity and things like that. It does have an SLC cache, which isn't bad. So this isn't a terrible drive or anything, and honestly, I think it could get the job done. I'm just gonna check if we could get something a bit faster than this for a similar price. So this is the Team Group MP33. You could look at all of these. I know what some of these are, but not all of them. I'm just gonna scroll down a little bit. Okay, so the MP34 is definitely the next step up in model. And at $74, this is not a huge difference in price. And let's take a look here. Yeah, so this one's going to go up to 3,500 and 2,900. It has a DRAM SLC cache, which helps out. It's 2 terabytes. Okay, it's a TLC drive, so not as going to be as bad as some of the QLC drives. So overall, this is pretty attractive. Honestly, I wonder how much the 4 terabyte version is. A 4 terabyte version for 160. That's honestly. Okay, I think for this build video, I'm gonna stick to 2 terabytes, but honestly, having 4 terabytes of space is certainly attractive. But $74 on these types of speeds with some DRAM SLC cache. Team Group, you might not have heard of them, but I've actually used some of their stuff before, had no issues. I'm gonna go ahead and add this one to the build, so we get 2 terabytes, and then I could bring in some storage that's a bit slower from my old build if needed. And so here, where we're actually at is where I would be if I was actually upgrading. Because despite the fact that my old case has pretty bad airflow, it still will fit all of these parts. And like I said, cards like the 4070 and the 7600 CPU, these aren't drawing huge amounts of power, so I'm not pushing out massive watts of energy into the case. So while it might be a little hotter than I would want, I think I would keep my old case. We're right here at $1,100. I still have a Windows install that I could reuse from that build. And power supply, I do have a decent EVGA 650 watt power supply. And this build will be fine on 650 watts. One nice thing on PC Part Power is it will at least give you an estimated wattage. Now there can be peaks, of energy usage beyond, what they're rated for and all that. But this isn't crazy high wattage. I could reuse a 650 watt power supply from my old build. So if this really was me just upgrading from my old build, this is where I'd stop. I'd reuse the CPU cooler, case, power supply, bring in some extra storage from the old build and the operating system install. And that would be it. And my monitor. I already had a decent ultra-wide 1440p monitor. So that's where I would stop. Now, if you're following along, though, and you're like, hey, I don't have those same parts to reuse, then I'll throw in a couple of options here. So if we're looking for a case, let's be honest here, the case, other than its cooling capacity, has no, and its ability to actually fit your parts in it, doesn't have any direct impact on your performance, but is something you're gonna have to look at a lot. So honestly, a lot of what you're gonna wanna look for in a case, in my opinion, is it should have some fans built in, because the case manufacturers can buy fans cheaper than you can in bulk. So a case with fans built in is probably going to be cheaper than buying a case without fans and then buying your own fans separately if you're looking for bang for the buck. There's also what the cases look like. Just glancing through things right here, this Deep Cool case here at $60, I don't know a lot about it. I haven't built in it personally, but it's showing 3 fans in the front, 1 in the back. They're probably not the highest quality ever. Looks like there's some airflow coming in through the front, some airflow available out the back. You can look at your parts. So honestly, I'm not the world's foremost case expert, but just I'm just like, okay, it's a black case with some lights and some fans. Nothing looks like a complete disaster about it, and it should be able to fit these parts. And you could obviously spend more on a case if there was a specific one you had in mind that you just like the looks of. You're gonna be looking at your PC a lot. The other thing I'll mention about cases, just their ease of building inside of them, where sometimes cheap cases can be annoying to build in, but if you build your PC once, get the job done, and you're not messing around in there too often, that's really more of an annoyance on the initial build. Another thing can be also the front panel headers, like do they have any USB, like how many USB slots are available there, and also if there's like a USB Type-C header or not on the front. That's also something you can look for if your motherboard's compatible with the headers and everything. But anyway, the sky's the limit on what you could spend on a case, but this one I have a feeling will probably be fine. I haven't used it personally. Power supplies. You definitely want to not buy completely no-name junk because feeding bad power to the rest of your system is probably not a great idea. Now, The 80 plus ratings are not actually a quality rating, they're an efficiency rating. But if you do actually search for at least 80 plus bronze and up, it will filter out some of the complete no-name junk that didn't even bother getting that kind of efficiency rating. You can sort prices low to high and also do a certain power amount. I think 650 watts would be completely fine for this build. If you wanted future upgradability to more power, more powerful CPUs and GPUs, you could shoot for a higher wattage. And also, I do think going with a good brand would be a good idea here. Some of these brands I don't know a whole lot about. This EVGA 700, I know the BR line is not their best, line. Also, I have my doubts on EVGA continuing as a company at this point. They seem to be kind of winding things down. But there's a 700 watt here. It's not a modular power supply. Corsair has a good reputation on their power supplies. This isn't their absolute highest end line, but a 2021 model 80 plus bronze 650 watt semi-modular. So if you're looking to save money, I think I'd probably throw in something like this Corsair 650 watt power supply right there, and this puts this now with a case and a power supply to about a $1,200 build, which again right was around my budget when I built last time a number of years ago. Now, if you did want to have more upgradability, fit like a much more powerful GPU in the future, the sky's the limit on how much power those might end up drawing. So I am noticing, something like this Corsair RM850E at 120 bucks, 80 plus gold, fully modular. I believe this one would even come, I think the 2023 model actually even comes with the ATX 3.0 like power connector thing. I don't know, I could probably look at the product page and tell. Some of the newer NVIDIA GPUs go with, the 12VH power cable. And this one looks like it plugs right back into the power supply off of that. So hey, this one would be, I think, more future-proof if you wanted big availability to upgrade. And honestly, upgrading power supplies is kind of annoying. So that's one place where you could throw something in here. Also, another place I think an upgrade could make a bit of sense here is on the CPU cooler. Like I said, I would be planning on reusing a previous one from a previous build, and there is a stock one included here. Also, if you did want to spend more money on this build, I think that you have to spend a lot more to get a much better GPU, unfortunately. But you could look at upgrading the GPU if you wanted to spend a bit more money. You could also upgrade the CPU to like an 8-core, that kind of a thing. Personally, I think the 7600 is going to be good enough because my build, like I said, was targeting 1440p ultra-wide, which is very demanding. And on a card of the 4070s class, I think I'm going to be mostly GPU limited at this point. So I think this is plenty. And then I'll have the future upgradability on that in the future. Anyway, so that's what I think I would do if I was buying doing a new build. And like I said, personally, I would be reusing some parts, so those would be off the list. And that would be my upgrade. And I think I'd be a lot happier with this than with the old build. There's a lot more upgrade potential on the overall motherboard platform. And all of that, so a lot happier with that than compared to the old build. Hopefully you guys found this useful and or interesting. It was kind of my own little thought experiment. I thought it might help you guys think about your build as well. What do you guys think? Everybody's looking for their own personal needs on what they're looking for in the build and everything. So I think some people might spend a little bit more on the motherboard, get one with Wi-Fi built in, things like that. It's another place you could look at. More features, all of that. Anyway, I hope all of you have an excellent day.